Yes, sir.
that we all can celebrate, appreciate God's grace. God's grace. Wow. Thank you, music ministry, for the music. Absolutely wonderful. And what is it we have? This is Father's Day. When Pastor Porter asked me to...
Hey, Father, start being up.
Fathers, yes, it is time to man up and break. You can't see that last line there. Break the silence. When Pastor Porter gave us the schedule, I think back in either December or January, I think it was December, so some 6 months ago, when I saw my name on the list for Father's Day, I tried to think of all sorts of reasons why I couldn't be here. Because I kept saying, why, Lord? Why, Lord, did you ask her to ask me to speak on Father's Day? It was troubling my spirit. But for as much as I was saying, find a reason to say no, God was whispering to me, my sister, you've got this. You must do this. So this is a message that God has been preparing for the last 6 months. Fathers, it is time to man up and break the silence. So I want to talk a bit about responsibilities and expectations. I will talk a bit about other fathers, black fathers. I'll break the silence and invite others to do the same. I will talk about the East Preston Empowerment Academy's Domestic Violence Project, and I want to end with an invitation to all to be involved. Let's pause for prayer. The scripture this morning was also the responsive lesson. I want to lift up one verse. Verse 11. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. I believe that God wants us to stop concealing violence. I believe that God wants us to choose to walk in integrity. For we want and need to walk securely. I believe that God wants us to choose our words and our actions very carefully. I believe that fathers are expected to use our words and our actions to encourage our children, to be life-giving and comforting and supporting. But we know that our words and our actions can and do cause harm. Our words and our actions can and sometimes are violent. Our words and our actions sometimes can lead to violence. God knows. God cares. This is not God's grace. Responsibilities and expectations. Two scriptures that kept coming to me. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. This is God's call on all of us, but it's especially God's call on fathers. And then Colossians 3:31. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. I want to give a warning, like they do with the movies, that some of what I may say today may cause some trauma, may cause some to relive some trauma. Some of what I have to say today may feel like harm, but it's intended to move us forward.
Speak the truth, woman. Speak the truth. Speak it.
There is so much stigma in our society about black men as absent dads, as deadbeat dads, as unavailable dads, as just not being fathers at all. Some even call them just sperm donors. I don't know what any of you, but I take notes everywhere, but I certainly take notes in church every Sunday. And if you see me on my phone, it's me taking notes. When my niece Marguerite's here, she likes to sit with me when Maxine doesn't steal her from me. When she sits with me, she reads my notes as I'm typing them in. And then after church, we have conversations about those sermons. That's how we do it. So one of the notes that I had that I was called back to was actually from May 2017, Deacon Andrews. Deacon Andrews still here? He's back there. Deacon Andrew did the Mother's Day message in May of 2017. Maybe Deacon Andrew and I are the only people who remember that, or possibly his mom. But one of the things he talked about, if you remember, or I'll remind you, he talked about single mothers. And he made a call to this church for us to stop stigmatizing single mothers. And he talked about the fact that it takes a village to raise our children, whether they're with single mothers or not. And I remember coming away from that service thinking about the fathers. Thinking, what about the fathers? One of the things that God led me to quite unexpectedly, actually, in preparing for today, was a talk that the late Reverend Dr. Fairfax gave in May of 1988 at a conference called Preserving the Black Family that was sponsored by the Association of Black Social Workers. And it was held at the old Dartmouth motel that was down by where the current superstore is today. And I remember when I was one of the organizers for that conference, one of the 4 founding members of the association. Is there some sort of, there's something, there's a buzz, it's not just me. There's a buzz, so we can try to fix the buzz. Oh, thank you. So this conference, I remember when we had this conference and that we had set up the space for 300 people. And I remember one of the other people on the program was the late Reverend Dr. Skier. And I remember when he came into the room and he saw the room and he sat beside me, he said, "Wanda, do you think are you really expecting this many people?" And I said, "Reverend, I've been praying." And you know, we did fill that room. 300 people came together to talk about preserving the black family. And just 6 months ago in January, I had tea with Lois Fairfax, the Fairfax's youngest daughter who lives in Toronto. And she called me to arrange to get together, partly because she was helping Donnie clear out the parents' house. And she came across his speech. This is his speech. But listen to it. She said, "I thought you might like to have this because Dad kept it." Here's the piece I want to share with you. Reverend Fairfax said, "I believe the survival of the black family has to start with the black male."
I agree.
He went on to say, "This means a focus on young black boys
Yes.
rather than black men. If our families are to survive
Yes.
and produce a strong generation of black men, we have
Yes.
We black men have to take a good look at ourselves and pinpoint our problems, then show our black males by example what we need in the future fathers and husbands of our community. (1988). So how have we done? How have we done?
More work to be
We could be doing that call today, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to repeat it today. I have been on a lifelong mission to address issues pertaining to black fathers. A lifelong professional journey, trying to bring positive attention to black men, highlighting the strengths of black men. And during the past 6 months, I've begun to face the fact that I have avoided talking about the reasons why this has been such a mission for me for the past 40-odd years. Pastor's message of March 31st, 2019 resonated with me. She talked about finding courage to be compassionate. Finding courage to be compassionate. And she went on to say, we are being called to compassion, even in the face of evil. The need to be called to compassion, even in the face of evil, spoke to the very core of my soul. It takes so much courage to be compassionate when we feel harmed, when we've been traumatized, when we've been hurt in some way. But Pastor reminded us that we must find the courage to be compassionate. So the old Wanda would have said, but I've been compassionate. Look at all that I've done. Look at all that I've done with black men. The conference, Fatherhood Today in the Diaspora, back in the 90s. My PhD research, the survival of black men, looking at black men's survival in 2 different countries, and the work with fathers. The black father and son video, passing the torch. I recently did a whole program for black fathers in prisons, in every prison in Atlantic Canada. I did all of this work. Recently met a colleague, social work professor at Trent University, who's doing research with children of prisoners and not getting much support. Because really, when people speak of children, of prisoners, they're typically talking about mothers. But what about the fathers? And then I had an epiphany. In April of this year, I visited Collins Bay Prison in Kingston, Ontario. I was supposed to be there in February for Black History Month to do a talk on Black history. And I had to cancel because of this massive snowstorm. I couldn't get there. We booked another date for March, and there was an incident at the prison, so they canceled my visit. I couldn't get there. I had this booking in April, about a week after I fell and fractured my shoulder. My team was saying to me, Senator, you're in a lot of pain. I don't really think you should go. What you're trying to do is a lot for anyone, and certainly for someone with a shoulder injury. At the time, I didn't know my shoulder was fractured. So I was moving around the country with a fractured shoulder. But I said, I've had to cancel with these men twice. I will not do it a third time, and I prayed for strength. So I flew from Halifax to Toronto, traveled from Toronto to Ajax, and then the next day took the train to Kingston, to Collins Bay Prison. And I did it because it's very important for you to know this. 60%, 60% of the prison population at Collins Bay Institution for Men, they have a minimum, medium, and maximum security. 60% of them are black men. And 30 showed up. 30 on the minimum security prison showed up for this talk I entitled Race, Mental Health, and Gender. And I'm there doing this talk on race, mental health, and gender. And I'm looking at this group of 30 men. And all of a sudden, my father's presence became so vivid to me. My relationship with my father, not intentionally, not by choice. Believe me when I say this is a relationship that I've avoided even thinking about, let alone talking about, for over 50 years. My father died when I was 12. But I kept getting these signs from God, encouraging me to go deeper, to uncover more of my story, more of our story, and to give voice to the voiceless. So I found myself telling these men this story. I found myself telling these men about the trauma that I experienced as a child, witnessing my father beating my mother, witnessing my father kicking her in the head with steel-toed boots, hating Friday nights, because this wasn't something that happened some of the time. It's something that happened every single week. And he died when I was 12. So these are memories that were imprinted in my memory. Memories that I've tried to suppress for 40 odd years. And then I talked to the men about being with my mother when she was so ill, when she'd have headaches that would last her for days. But she would still go to work. She was a widow with 12 kids. Of course she worked every day. She had to work every day. And she would sometimes have headaches that lasted for days. The kind of headaches that make you physically ill. The kind of headaches that make you want to throw up. The kind of headaches that are totally demobilizing, immobilizing. And then I would remember seeing her being kicked in the head, not once, but over and over and over again. This happened before I was 12 years old. And as I found myself going off script and sharing this story with these men, I could see them relax into the conversation. I could see them listening. I could see that they were thinking about their own experiences. And maybe that's what's happening right here, right now. Maybe some of you are thinking about what you've experienced or what you've witnessed. And I realize just how difficult. Grief and loss happen on many levels, but forgiveness also happens on many levels. This is the one picture I have of my mother and father. It's an older picture. When I look at the picture, I try hard to remember other things about my father and about their relationship. But I know I didn't invite friends to our house. Why? I never knew when things could erupt. Brother Graham, you may be wondering why we spent so much time at your house, at the Tollivers. And Uncle Charlie was always sending us home. It was a happy space. Ours wasn't so happy. So I realized that my personal journey, the trauma, on the day that my father was killed, he was killed in a car accident. On the day that he was killed, I cooked his breakfast. 12 years old, cooking breakfast, sausage and eggs on an old wood stove. Lord have mercy, what was I even doing? And I had just turned 12, 29 days before, so I was obviously doing this breakfast, this cooking thing, long before then. I think I started cooking for the family when I was about 10. I cooked his breakfast. I burnt the sausages. He yelled at me, called me stupid, swore at me, called me names. What's wrong with you? You can't do anything right. I didn't say anything back to him. I was one of those kids, you know, I didn't do that thing, talk back. I kept it internal. Internally, I said, I wish you were dead. I hate you, I wish you were dead. And a few hours later, our cousin George Tolliver came to our house to tell us that there was a very serious accident. And Mom and our oldest brother Irvin had to go to the hospital they didn't know when they left home, but they were going to claim Dad's body. So my father never came home that night. The night that I wished him dead. I didn't really want him dead, but I wanted the violence to stop. I wanted the pain to stop. And I'm one of these people, I analyze things over and over and over and over. Probably too much so, but I still do it anyway. My daughter said to me, Mom, I was telling her about the Collins Bay visit. I went back to her place after the trip to Kingston. She said, Mom, do you have any happy memories of your dad? She asked me that question back in April. And honestly, for as much as I've prayed for a happy memory, for as much as I've asked God to hold back the painful memories and push forward some positive memories of my dad, I don't think there are any. I think if there were some, I would have found them. I look at this picture, and I like to think that there were some positive times. I just didn't see them. I didn't see them. So that experience, or those experiences, that whole set of experiences, the personal journey has certainly informed and continues to inform all of my work. But I believe that today, because of the encouragement and the discernment that I've been gifted through pastor's ministry, I believe that today it informs my work in a much more authentic way. And so that's part of the reason why I've decided that it's time to violence, about violence in our communities. Recognizing all the reasons why we've been silent for all of these years. Recognizing all the reasons why people want to hold on to their pain, why we sit on the pain. Recognizing all of the reasons why we want to hold on to the shame. It is time to let it go. Let it go. It is time to let it go. And it's time for us to embrace the bad with the good. The bad doesn't have to override the good.
That's right.
And that's one of the things that I certainly remember. Other fathers. Other fathers. I've had a life journey of speaking about the positives of other fathers. Reverend Dr. Fairfax was one of those people for me. Absolutely. I wanted to share these pictures of George. 16 years ago, George was diagnosed with fourth stage cancer. He's still here. He's still here. He is truly a miracle. And he often will say, and for the last 6 months, he has spent most of his time in Ajax, Ontario, providing child care for those little boys, his grandsons, being an other father. And one day he said to me, he said, Wanda, you know, I didn't expect to be doing this much hands-on at this stage of my life. And I just said to him, but God kept you here for a reason. God kept you. Most people, you know, they diagnose cancer stages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And most people diagnosed at a stage 4 don't have long to live. Those of you in healthcare, you know this. Those of you with your own cancer journeys, you know this. 16 years. But he's there with the boys. He's there with those boys.
Praise God.
Traveling, enjoying, just being. Other fathers step in the gap, sometimes when they don't even know that they are. We never would have made it without our granddad Thomas. We lived across the road from him. An amazing, amazing man. He fed us when we couldn't feed ourselves. I don't think anyone knew that. Uncles, Uncle Charlie was amazing. Neighbors. I think about Noel Johnston. Unbelievable. Teachers. Unbelievable. Other fathers who stand in the gap. And sometimes they don't even know that they are standing in the gap. Family friends. Community fathers. So to the men here, I want to say, who are you standing in the gap for? Who are you standing in the gap for? The village has to include men. Amen. The village has to include our fathers. Marcus James, a grandchild of this community, started 902 Man Up. The late Wade Smith, Sean Parker, and so many more young black men are doing this program, 902 Man Up. They're reaching out into the community, providing support and help and encouragement to young brothers, doing what Reverend Fairfax said we need to do. Yeah. So it's not just what happens in the family, it's also what happens in our communities.
Yes, amen.
I firmly believe that part of manning up in our communities means we must break the silence about violence.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's not being untrue to a memory of a loved one who's no longer here. It isn't about that.
No.
It isn't about that at all. But we need to remember that we're carrying the trauma of multi-generations.
Yes, yes, yes.
Going right back to slavery. So we have to do something differently.
Yes.
We can't keep doing the same old things and expecting different results. We must do things differently. In 2017, Deacon Andrew talked about the need for the village. And I'm reminding you today that the village includes men. The village includes men. So single men who don't have children, you have some responsibilities too. Grandfathers, great-grandfathers, uncles, doesn't matter who you are or where you are. Single men, maybe you have more time to devote to other fathering, helping someone else. Let's break the silence. We must break the silence. It's up to us.
Yes, it is.
We can't look around and say, well, who's going to do this for us?
Yeah, that's right.
This is really, really, really up to us.
That's right.
The East Preston Empowerment Academy is actually going to make it easier for you to do so. How about that? How about that? We have this project that was funded by the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women called Creating New Pathways for African Nova Scotian Boys and Men to Break the Silence About Domestic Violence. This is a project that's going to be going on in this community,
Hey!
for this community.
Good news.
But it will only work if some of you show up. It will only work if you participate. This whole program, the Standing Together Domestic Violence Prevention Program, has 3 pillars. The first one is prevent. Prevent violence by disrupting the cycle of violence.
Yes, yes.
I have shared with you today in an attempt to show you that the cycle of violence can be broken.
Yes, 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 yes.
And when we speak about it, other people benefit.
Yes.
Other people benefit. So we need to prevent violence by disrupting the cycle. We need to support victims of violence. We must support the victims of violence. It's very, very important. And then we must shift policies and interventions. Now, I'll tell you, the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women is very keen to reach into our communities. This book, and I'm going to make sure this is in the library. I think we've had copies of it at the church here before. This is put out by the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women. It's called Making Changes. And there's a whole little section here on African Nova Scotian families. So there's a recognition that sometimes we've suffered in silence because we're afraid to go to the police, because we know the police and black community relationships, police and black men's relationships are not very good, not very positive. You know, we know, so sometimes we suffer in silence because we don't want to bring that public attention to our private pain. But we must.
Yes, we must.
We must. So this book will be available. We have some other resources available for you today as well, and we will as this project goes on. But as we're talking about violence, we're talking about physical violence. We're also talking about emotional violence.
That's right, that's right.
Those words that wound, the words that hurt. My father never hit me. Never. But the wounds of his words have stayed with me my entire life. I think if he had physically hit me, those wounds would have healed already. So emotional violence hurts. Sexual violence.
Speak it.
It happens. No means no, even in a marriage. No means no. Means no, means no. Even in a marriage, even in a relationship.
She's not your property.
That's right. She's not your property, Sister Debbie said. Financial violence. I remember the humiliation, the absolute humiliation that my grandmother used to feel every Friday when she went for groceries, because she didn't control, she had no money. She only had what he gave her. He put a limit on what she could spend on the very food they were to eat. He would stand outside Sobeys on Main Street. And when she went to the checkout, that's when he'd go in to pay. Deacon James Slaughter, church hero, home devil. God forgive me for saying it, but I'm speaking the truth.
Set yourself free.
And I've been set free by speaking the truth. And you know, grandmother, God rest her soul, she became free the age of 66 when she started getting her pension. She got it a year late. She got it a year late. She had lied about her age. When she got her pension and she could spend her money on things she wanted to spend, I saw this woman being empowered and enlightened. And that gave me such hope.
Yes, yes, yes. Women, get together, get it together.
Domestic violence. It's violence in the family. It's violence against women. It's violence against seniors. It's violence against children. Violence against family members impacts children.
Yeah.
You don't have to directly experience it. And this violence happens in the broader context of violence being okay in our society. And for us, people of African descent, it's in the broader context of racial violence as well. And you know, one of my research projects looked at racism as a form of violence. So one of the reasons why I've been silent about violence is because of that broader context of racial violence. But as I've said, we cannot afford to continue the silence. It's locking us down.
That's right.
It's holding us back.
That's right. That's
It's keeping us entrapped. It's keeping us steeped in the pain and the shame
Yes.
and the stigma, and we need to be free of that.
Yes, yes.
We need to let it go.
Yes, yes.
We need to let it go.
Get help first.
So part of that, letting it go, is disrupting the cycle of violence. So let me give you the highlights of this project. We're going to start with a mini workshop for East Preston men and boys and women. We want the whole group to come to that, women and girls as well. And then we're going to have a series of workshops with a small group of men and boys to focus on building awareness and prevention. Those will happen from October to February. Just a small group. And then there'll be a social media campaign. From that small group, we want to take your words, your memories, your suggestions, and put into the social media campaign. And then in March, we'll have another workshop that will highlight. So remember, the focus of this work is on prevention, but the end result will be shifting policies and interventions. And we want to partner with the Health and Wellness Ministry and the Empowering Christian Women Ministry to look at ongoing support for victims, because we must acknowledge that that's part of what we need to do as well. So, the first workshop is going to be held on September 22nd, 2019, right after service. It'll be a lunch, 1 to 4 p.m. Lunch will be provided. We invite some of you who are here to sign up today. Some of you, if you know some people that should be here, sign them up today. We're inviting you to take action. Stop sitting on the pain. Stop sitting on the shame. And step out of your comfort zone today. I want to introduce the project coordinator that's been hired to coordinate this project. Warren, if you could just stand, please. Warren Kelsey. Warren is a registered nurse, and he also has his bachelor's degree in social work. He's one of my former students, and he's a successful applicant who's been hired to do the coordination of this project. How can you help? How can you get involved? One of the things I would say is respond when you're contacted. Don't say you're too busy. Don't say there's too much going on. Don't say, well, violence never happened to me. Doesn't matter. Don't say, I've never been violent. Doesn't matter. We want men and boys from this community to help break the cycle. And you can volunteer. So there are many ways to be involved. Martin Luther King once said, Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that really matter. Violence in our families, violence in our communities, violence in our homes really matters. We don't want our lives to end because we're silent. Break free, break through. Fathers, we need you to man up. Fathers, we recognize you can be victims too, but we need you to man up, be part of helping to break the cycle.
Amen.
One of the projects that I've done is co-edited a book on mothers and sons. And as part of that work, part of that book, I personally wrote a chapter on my work with Black fathers and Black men in prisons. And wrote part of that up in this book. And one of the things that they talk about is what it means to be a Black man. And this man is talking about life lessons from another mother. He was talking about life lessons from his foster mother. His birth family abandoned him, and he was in foster care. And his foster mother tried to change the foundation, tried to change the narrative, tried to create new pathways for him. And as he's sitting in prison and talking to me, he says to me, "I wish I had listened more." And so I remember in the conversation with him, I remember saying to him, "So what are the things that she shared with you at that time that you wish you had listened to then?" And these are the things. He said his foster mother taught him that he should try to manage conflict with words and not fists. He was always fighting somebody. And his foster mother would tell him, "You have to stop this. This isn't helping you. You need to stop this." Secondly, he said she used to always tell him education is a passport to the future. If you want to have a future, if you want to have a good future, a stable future, education is very important. Getting your education is very important. And then the third point, trauma does not have to define you.
That's right.
Trauma does not have to define you. You can become better and not bitter. Amen. And remember Colossians 3:31, fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. We must not embitter. I'm coming close to the end now. Reverend Dr. Porter, in her year-end letter, encouraged us to stretch ourselves, to learn more, to share what we learn, and to mentor others, to become their very best for God. She reminded us to reset our goals, to reset our aspirations, to regain excitement and anticipation in all of what God seems to do amongst us. Pastor Porter's mission here was to strengthen and develop or build up the people of EPUBC. People united and becoming more like Christ. She encouraged us to get involved in some ministry or missions opportunity and to work together in unity for some common good. Amen. So I'm reminding you of that today, church. Reset your goals. Reset your aspirations. Regain your excitement and anticipation in all of what God seems to do amongst us. Reset your goals. And I pray that one of those goals is to be part of the project to stop the violence. It is time for us to take things to the next level. So 4 takeaways. When you leave here today, I want you to continue the conversation. I want you to remember that issues around domestic violence matter, and we must break the cycle. Break the silence to break the cycle. Fathers, I want you to remember that God does not want you to be afraid to man up, to speak up. 3, remember that verse, Proverbs 10:11. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Become that mouth of the righteous. Become that life-giving force for your children, your community, your grandchildren, for other children in your neighborhood. And number 4, sign up today to participate in the Domestic Violence Project. This is our time, church.
Yes.
This is our time to break the silence. This is our time to stop the violence. This is our time. As I said at the beginning, some of what I had to say today may be hard to hear. And at this time, I'm going to call upon the deacons and the ministers to just post yourself at different spots in the church where you are and just engage in some circles of prayer. I want you to pause right now and just pray. Pray for yourselves if you need to. Pray for someone else if you need to. Pray that we break the cycle of violence. Praise God. Let the healing begin. Releasing has happened. Let the healing begin. Father God, we thank you for all that you have done, for all that you have given. And we know, dear God, we never would have made it this far without you, dear God. And we know, God, that you will lead, you will guide, and you will direct us as we go forward. These things we ask in your name. Amen. And amen. Continue the conversations. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, continue the conversations so that we help to stop the violence. As you have conversations over lunch today, continue the conversation. Let's not back away from this. Let's continue. Thank you.